Hello, I'm the Wild Nerd. This is another video. I'm going to be talking about City of the Damned, which I've not actually talked about for basically 5 months because I've been working on it. I've been working pretty hard on City of the Damned. It's basically finally done after many months of working on it, writing, creating the narrative, creating the quests, the characters, obviously doing the programmatic part in the background with Twine and Chapbook. So I'm just going to talk very generally about pre-release, which will hopefully be in the next month, about City of the Damned and what it's about and what I've tried to achieve with this interactive fiction game, which is going to be released on Android. Potentially as well, I'm thinking I'm also going to release it as an executable, probably via itch.io at first, so you can play it on PC. Potentially Mac as well, and download it as an Android app. Apple, it'd be good to get it done as an Apple iPhone app too, but again, it's just like I'm not as familiar with the build process for Apple, and I don't actually have Apple devices, so that's going to be quite difficult. But anyway, I digress. So City of the Damned is a sort of noir, futuristic game. It's set in the near-ish future, just after super virus has swept throughout the world. Obviously there are some contemporary sort of events that influence this, but it's not explicitly about that, obviously. So you play a sort of detective, a sort of paranormal occult investigator who comes to a city called New Vienna, and you are essentially just free to there is a sort of main quest which you're guided along, but you are basically free to take on any of the 5 quests in whatever order you want, and to explore the world. There is a sort of light RPG element to it a bit, so I've tried to actually experiment a bit more with. So the last game I did, Noir Nights, also had slight RPG elements, but I've obviously tried to make that a bit more complicated, a bit more complex, and I give it more depth actually. So there's you've got a choice of gun you can choose. There are various actions which will either enhance or decrease certain traits. So you have like constitution, strength, obviously accuracy for your gun, and various actions you take in the game or interacting with various objects can either increase or decrease those traits, right? And there's also quite funny examples as well, like a bit like in games like Morrowind or the Elder Scrolls, like, so if for example you drink beer, it's going to decrease your accuracy. So there's things like that in the game as well. So again, I've tried to make this game so that it is the focus. It gives a degree of freedom to the player. Obviously there are 5 quests, you can do them in whatever order you want. So there is a certain linear nature to it, but you could also just go do wild card thing and just go crazy if you want. You can play more evil, you can play more good, and obviously depending on how you play can dictate the course of what happens. So I've tried to you haven't got, obviously it's not like an open world game, you don't have complete free will, but I've tried to at least infuse the narrative with a high degree of choice. I mean, like with all these games I've made in the past, it's basically a choose your own adventure game, like the old classics, but I've tried to implement a fairly decent level of RPG, and so it gives you more replayability, right? Obviously, so like I said, there are unpredictable things that can happen. There are funny little paths you can go down. In a way, it was actually because I was very conscious, though, of course, of not wanting to over-engineer it. This is just a solo project that I've been working on, quite a lot in the last few months. I'll probably actually just do a time-lapse video as well, which I'll link to, which just shows how much work I've done. Because I've really been trying to push Twine and the chapbook format in Twine to the limit of what I'm able to do with it. For the actual artwork, I've used, and this is another reason I did this project, I wanted to see how well I could use Midjourney to generate the artwork. So there's actually been a few hundred artworks generated with Midjourney. I think probably for the itch.io release, I'll also have it so that if you download the executable via itch.io, so the Windows version, you'll also get a pack of all the artworks for free. I think that's probably a nice thing to do. Music wise, so at the minute I'm just seeing if I can get some original music made for the game. That's not going to be a definite thing, but if that's possible, then I'm just asking a composer friend of mine if he's got time to do that, basically. If that is the case, if he has, then obviously he's going to be put the release back by about a month. There is still a lot of testing and things to do anyway, so it's not really a big deal. But basically, probable release date is either going to be later this month, so either late May or mid to late June. Like I said, it'll be available on Android. I'll also make an executable available. Like I said, at the minute I'm just going through the final bug testing. There is like a lot of that to do. I'll share a screen grab actually the actual twine node layout, and you can see there's quite a lot of stuff going on there. Like I said, I've really tried to push twine to the limits of what it can do. I think in terms of next things I'm going to work on, just as an update to this channel in general, I am working on a game engine of sorts for A-Frame, so that's actually progressing quite well. It now supports AR on a basic level. I'm going to see how much further I can push that, tidy it up obviously. That's Papyrus 3D. I've started to, and then obviously once that's got a map editor, that's got a VR and AR mode supported. I'm just at the minute trying to figure out a basic AI system for the enemies, but again, that's quite a big project, so I don't know if I want to go too far with it. In terms of like actually being able to generate environments in VR and AR, it already works. But yeah, I just want to see if we can set up like a patrol routine, idle routine, and an attack routine, so that gives you the ability to implement enemies if you want Papyrus 3D. I won't go on too much about that because that's a separate. I'll probably make a separate vlog about that, and also this vlog's about City of the Damned. But yeah, watch out for City of the Damned. Whilst I'm doing this video, I'm just gonna have like a bunch of screen grabs, playthroughs playing in the background, so you can sort of see what it looks like. I'm pretty happy with how it's ended up. I'm quite proud of it so far. Be interested to see what people think. One last minute thing I actually did was to, before the sort of like buttons, your interactions were sort of a bit hidden. There was like black and white, so that most of the, which was made it possibly, I realised at the last minute, quite hard to see where exactly you had to do click or tap pardon me, for interactions. So I've given it like a background colour, makes it more obviously a button for interactivity in most cases. So yeah, that's just a bit of an overview on City of the Damned, how it's progressed. I have actually managed to get it done. Like I think I've realised and I've realised this for the last few years, like invariably with game dev or making tooling systems or libraries or whatever, some projects die, but I'm trying to figure out, get better at like having a decent idea, which I think potentially could also monetize, and really just focusing on it, getting it done. And I'm glad that I've managed to do that with City of the Damned. It's been about 6 months dev time, which is a pretty good dev life cycle for a project, I think. I mean, it's pretty standard if even if you're making a game like this, which isn't like hugely ridiculously ambitious, like an open world GTA game or something, or, you know. But if I was going to make any point, I see, especially if you're a solo game dev, it's very important, I think, to focus on realistic projects, right? And I've been guilty of this myself. I'm like, oh, I'm going to make the classic one that every game dev has done, and I'm not free of this, is I'm going to make a space sim, which I actually started doing about 7 or 8 months ago, and actually got somewhere fairly far with it, and then I realised, oh my god, there's so much to do. Because I was working on this like solar gold rush thing. You'll see some vlogs on the same channel about it. And it does actually work on some fundamental level, but the code is buggy. It's like really hard to optimize now. I was actually experimenting with creating a sort of cut down version of it for generative galaxies, because that does sort of work, which is quite cool, right? There's one cool feature of it. But yeah, realistically, if you're a solo game dev like I am, and I am trying to find more people to work with, but it's not that easy. You really do have to focus on achievable projects, right? You have to really focus on, if you're going to focus on doing game dev or tooling systems and that, you have to really just focus intensely on one, maximum of 2 things maybe in the background. That's been a lesson for sure. Like I've been pretty happy with, like, I've released a few, like, you know, like I've been doing a lot of stuff with A-frame, and released like a few components with it, which might be useful for people, and that's a good sort of, and that, actually a lot of that stuff came out of doing Papyrus 3D, which I'm now. So yeah, it's all, there's some unforeseen benefits that come actually from working on some really ambitious thing, and then you can just take parts of that code that you've developed and use it to develop like an open source library or component library, which is quite cool. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble too long. I've sort of found my enthusiasm for programming again, which is nice. Like, I've sort of lost it a bit last year, mostly due to, I had a bit of a burnout, really, to be honest. Like, I was working, I was contracting, and you know, and doing a lot of WebXR contracting, which was really good for a while. Did some good work, but I won't go too much into that. I think I've already talked about it in some other videos, but yeah, I had a bit of negative experience in my last job, so I sort of it really put me off programming for a while. But I found the bug again, no pun intended, for the, you know, I've got like the passion for it again a bit now, so I'm actually starting to enjoy it again. Look at, in my life, I'm sort of like in a weird place. I'm like sort of like back at my parents and stuff, so that sucks a bit. This is more just a life update at the end of the video, sorry. So you can switch off if you want, but one way that I am focusing my energy, my creative energy, is by working on these projects, which I've got many, and I think it, you know, it's good obviously for potentially trying to find another job, and also it just gives me something to focus on in terms of my mind and creativity. And also it's good for portfolio building as well. Like, I potentially really want to actually get into doing interactive fiction design, narrative fiction design as a job, okay, for a company, a game studio. So if anyone is watching this who creates narrative fiction games, like, I've worked with Twine, I've worked with various engines, Unity, Unreal, more Unreal, actually, to be honest with that, but yeah, I have experience in that area. Play Canvas I've got quite extensive experience with as well, and JavaScript, lots of, mostly JavaScript, TypeScript dev really. But yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that, I'm just rambling now a bit, so. Watch out for City of the Damned. I think it's a fairly good game. I think if you enjoy noir detective or sort of like horror occult games, sort of Lovecraftian maybe in a bit of ways, you'll find a lot to love in the game. It's probably going to be released for about I think 99p on Android stores, not really much. Probably similar sort of price on Windows, won't be much, I'll just be on that. If you want to release it for Windows at first on itch.io, maybe do a Steam release, but I mean, probably not, because whilst it is quite a cool game, and I think it's, you know, it's a nice game, I think if you're going to release something on Steam, it has to be like it has to be a really, really large, polished game. Like, you know, no one should pay £5 or £10 or 20 quid for a game that you can play or finish in 20 minutes. Now, City of the Damned actually isn't a game you can really say that of, because you can replay it multiple times. There's so many different ways, configurations of, yeah, like the core loop of the game potentially could finish in 20 minutes. Yeah, obviously there is replayability, like I've said, I've tried to stress, there's a lot of replayability in the game. But yeah, you can basically finish the game in one way or the other in about 20 minutes, maybe 10, depending on what you do, basically. So yeah, like obviously if I was going to create something for Steam, if I was going to play something as a gamer myself, if I'm going to download something on Steam, I'm expecting 2 or 3 gameplay hours at least for a single player game. Otherwise, you're just sort of ripping people off. And I know people do that on Steam. You know, look, I've made a Game Guru RPG shooter game myself, and released it on itch.io for free now. But I don't want to become one of those devs who just like sort of basically scamming people. Like, just here's like a game I made, and yeah, that it affects your reputation anyway if you release stuff like that, right? Like, it's just, I do actually want to focus on releasing quality stuff, make it as high quality as I can, obviously do fixes and patches where I need to support those games. Because yeah, I believe in them. I believe this project's be really interesting. It's because it's combined doing writing, dialogue, and graphics, and everything. So it's been fun. Anyway, I'll leave the video there. So going off to in a bit. Like and subscribe, obviously. Find this interesting.